it is about getting in the market, because you can read all the books you like, but when you're actually doing it, it makes a lot more sense. So getting in the market, but also buying the right property as well. It's really, really important that you buy the right property.
Yep.
And you have the flexibility. So you might fix a portion of your loans, but then keep another portion variable.
Yep.
You buy something that you could add value to. So if you do want to buy again, or you do need to access that equity, you've got the ability to create that equity as well.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how and where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute and every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You will hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested.
Hi, Freedom Fighters. Have you ever bought a property? If you haven't, then at some stage you're probably likely to. Now, I don't know about you, but it doesn't matter how many times I've bought a property, and it's quite a few, it's still always a massive, stressful, time-consuming headache. Just the thought of it makes me break out in a sweat. To start with, we need to work out how much we can afford to spend. And then we spend hours, days, weeks, and often months researching properties, talking to real estate agents, and driving around countless hours after work and most of our weekends looking at them. And when we do finally find a property we like, there's then the added pressure of negotiating with a real estate agent, making offers and counter-offers, and then the painful, nail-biting waiting game of seeing if the seller has accepted it. And often we finally find the perfect property, only to find that someone's already just bought it out from underneath us, and we're back to square one, starting the whole painful process all over again. And if we're forced to go and try and buy the property at auction, there's the extra added stress of the fear of missing out to a high bidder, or being forced to pay much more for the property than we thought. So most of us, who are already absolutely flat out with work and looking after the family, just don't have the time, we don't have the expertise, we don't know who to trust, and we don't know where to start. So how can we avoid all of this pressure and headache? Well, very simply by using a trusted and proven buyer's agent or buyer's advocate who acts as your professional, independent, expert eyes, ears, arms and legs to find, negotiate and secure your perfect property at the right price. A good buyer's agent is worth their weight in gold, and it's why I continue to talk about their importance to your property success, whether you're a home buyer or a property investor. A good one will save you lots of time, lots of money and lots of stress. So what is a buyer's agent? Why should you use one? And what separates a good buyer's agent from a bad one? Well, this is where today's guest comes in. Tracy Leske and her business, Cherish Property, is a multiple award-winning buyer's agency in South East Queensland who has been involved in all facets of the residential property industry for nearly 20 years. Along with myself and a select number of other property professionals, Tracy was listed in the top 10 property specialists in Australia by the Property Investor magazine. So I decided to reach out and have a chat. Tracy operates on the simple motto that if it will be, it is up to me. And like all successful professionals that I know, she gives freely to others, and she also shares our passion for voiceless and innocent animals and has established her own award-winning non-for-profit group, Oceans to Earth, which has achieved incredible things in animal welfare around the world over the last 7 years. She's full of energy and fun, so please enjoy this great conversation with Tracy Leske. Welcome back, Freedom Fighters. It's Bushy Martin with the Get Invested podcast. And today I've got the real pleasure of spending some time with Tracy Leske. Now, Tracy is someone who is highly awarded, and she was nominated in the top 10 property specialists in Australia last year by the Property Investor magazine, and I was humbled and fortunate enough to be a part of that same list. So I thought it would be a great opportunity for us to have a chat and share some experience in our life journeys and property to date. So welcome aboard, Tracy.
Thank you, Bushy. Nice to be here.
Excellent. Now, Tracy, though I've done quite a bit of research on you and what you do, for those listeners who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. As you said, my name's Tracy Leske and I run a company called Cherish Property. So predominantly buyer's agent, just looking at helping people get into investment, buy homes to live in, and just get ahead if they're interested in property.
Excellent. Now, digging a little bit deeper around that, why do you do the buyer's agency piece, Tracy?
Oh, look, I fell in love with property about 20 years ago. Bought my first house at 28 and got into an investment property in Melbourne, and I think I got hooked. I left my current job and went and worked in property, and I've had a 20 career ever since. But look, I think it's a great vehicle for wealth creation. And given Australia's excellent, positive state of market, just love it. Just have been interested in it ever since, and just got deeper and deeper as the years have gone past.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's dig in there and go back over that history a little bit. So, age of 28, you bought your first property, and it sounds like you're doing something else. And from having a bit of a read, it looks like there's a bit of an education base prior to that. Can you take us through what you were doing at the time, and what was the motivation and the thinking around I need to get into property?
Sure. I was working in workplace education. I've got a couple of degrees in teaching. So I was working for a company at the time, and I think my mum got me into investing. She had me buying IPOs when I was about 15 with the first $800 I saved up from McDonald's. So she definitely was got me into investing. My parents had an investment property at the time, so I used to sit and watch her doing all of the figures by hand when we didn't have computers back then. So she would write down all the outgoings and the incomings. So yeah, I think it was in my blood.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I've found a lot of people I talk to who get into property grow up in an environment where property is part of the mix. But was your mother the key driver there? So she obviously in property and looking at the internet boom at the time, the IPOs and whatnot that were happening around that. What grabbed your interest around that? And when did that kick off, do you think? How young were you when that started to take shape, Tracy?
I can tell you when I was 16, I made my first $800 in McDonald's, and she said, "Why don't you put that in a term deposit?" And I said, "Okay." So I remember now we put the $800 in a Bank of Melbourne term deposit, getting 16%.
Wow!
And I locked it away for a year or two, and I came out with about $1,100. And I went, "Hey, I like this. Let's do some more of this."
Awesome. Yeah, really good grounding from a very early stage. Talk to us about then, if we move forward into that first property purchase at 28. What was it?
Yeah, sure.
Why did you do it? What made you think that property was the vehicle to put some money into?
Look, I think money's always been a driver for me. Money equals freedom and choices.
Yeah. And
obviously being in my 20s and wanting independence and wanting my own place, I just worked really, really, really hard and bought a house in Surrey Hills in Victoria.
Okay.
Great suburb, about 186,000 that was, and it's a beautiful red brick home on a 600 square metre block of land worth about 900 now.
Yes, awesome.
So that was great. Did a few renovations. So got into property just because I was just motivated. Property seemed like a good vehicle. I was working hard. I wanted somewhere to put my money. And so it just seemed like the obvious choice. I mean, Surrey Hills was a great suburb. It was a blue chip suburb, and it was probably was really taking off at the time, actually.
Okay.
So yeah.
Awesome. Now, sort of in conjunction with that, then with the property purchase, was that when you jumped ship from education into the property arena from a career perspective, or did that happen later?
Yeah, that happened later. I met my now husband soon after I purchased that property in Surrey Hills.
Yeah.
And we decided that we were going to buy an investment property. So we started doing the seminar circuit.
Okay.
So we got seats to Michael Yardney, who was the first one that was really spruiking property back then. There was also finance companies and accountancy firms that were touring the circuit and teaching everybody about negative gearing.
Yeah.
So we spent probably a good 5 years investigating investments, and because then I started working in property, and that was predominantly in the beginning I started off in a little stint in mainstream sales. Yep. But then somebody threw a 35 property portfolio at me, and then I stumbled into property management.
Okay.
So it was a real learning stage those first few years.
Yeah, awesome. So while you're sort of increasing your knowledge in all things property by diving in deep into seminars and other bits and pieces, how long was it before you actually physically made that change into initially property sales and then into property management?
I bought my house when I was in 98, and I bought my first investment property in 2001. So I did not waste time, and that's one thing about me, is that once I make a decision to do something, I do the research, I consult the experts, and I actually make a decision to do it. And luckily, my husband was the same, so we didn't really waste any time. We went out there and we bought a unit in Balwyn. Yeah. I mean, you just got to get stuck into it. I mean, you can research as much as you want, but we found that we learn a lot by actually doing it. And then my job kind of just progressed after that in real estate in a variety of roles. Okay,
and was that because someone could see that you obviously had the passion and the energy around property and approached you to get into the property arena, or is it something that you said, no, I really love this, I really want to get my hands dirty and get involved in the industry?
Yeah, look, I'm proactive. I'm the one that goes out there and seeks the opportunities.
Awesome. Now, you started in sales and then you moved to property management, and having my wife and I owned, ran and sold a property management business that we had for about 12 years or thereabouts. And property management is a very different kettle of fish to sales. So can you talk me through your thinking at the time? So from some of the research, it looks like you started with Divine, and I'm assuming that was selling new build properties, and then the 35 property portfolio came along. Talk us through your thinking and your motivations then as to why you went from the sales side into property management.
Oh, look, I only lasted in mainstream sales for 3 months, Bushy.
Okay.
But I did the hard yards. I was on the phone and I was doing the mail drops, and I did get a listing.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from that. But I soon realised that it was not for me. I thought there was a little bit of a conflict of interest being a real estate agent, where you had a vested interest in getting a deal done.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's some great real estate agents around, but I just found for me it just didn't sit well with me. So I went to become an executive with a real estate company. And as I mentioned, they said, here you go, our property manager just left his 35 properties. And in the next 2 years, I grew it to 400. Massive. And of course, I was also thrown all the trust accounting on top of that. So I became trust accountant and learned how to do all of the financials too.
Awesome, and no better crucible in real estate than in property management. Having seen firsthand what that involves. You get to see the good, the bad and the ugly, and in terms of honing your negotiation and conflict management skills, there's no better place. So you stayed with property management for some time, Tracy?
I did. I was in property management for about 8 or 9 years. I was licensee for 2 or 3 offices. I was head of department, and I looked after teams of property managers. We bought rent rolls, which usually when you buy a rent roll, as you probably know, Bushy, you're buying a lot of problems.
Yep.
So I found it really rewarding to take a rent roll of frustrated tenants and landlords to just getting the systems in place, getting the processes in place, doing what you needed to do in order to get maximum rent.
Yeah.
And just have it fit in with the existing portfolio and run really smoothly.
Yeah, nice work. It's a very challenging industry, and you would know better than I that in South Australia, at least where we're based, the average life of a property manager is 6 months. And a lot of that's because the property management departments are tacked on afterthoughts to a sales division, and they're not resourced properly. They're really not given the systems, and then they're buried with way too many properties. And obviously that doesn't work for anyone. The landlords aren't happy. The tenants aren't treated the right way. The property managers are the meat and the sandwich. What were the key things that you implemented on that journey that really made it work so well for you in that property management arena? Tracy, can you remember?
Oh, the key thing is that tenants are also customers. You have a landlord, and obviously you want to deliver excellent customer service to that landlord, but the tenants are also your customers.
Yes.
They're people who are renting a property from you, and they deserve exactly the same level of customer service. So when you are handed a rent roll, usually you're handed about 120 maintenance items that have been outstanding as well. So the minute the letters go out to the tenant saying we've taken over, all of a sudden the problems just come out. We asked for this, we asked for that, this has not been done.
Yeah.
So I think that if in order to run a tight ship, if you're pleasing the tenant, it means that your systems are in place, they're getting the appropriate notifications, entry notices, etc. They're getting all their maintenance completed. I mean, the last thing you want to do is have a landlord on board that's not looking after their tenant or not looking after the property.
Yeah, excellent. Now, during that 8 years then, were you continuing with your husband to build your own property portfolio? What were you doing in your own investment arena over that time, Tracy?
Yeah, sure. Accumulation phase, I call it.
Yeah, awesome.
So borrowing as much money as we could, whether it be when we ran out of conforming lending, we went to non-conforming lending, which were higher interest rates, and we had about 7 properties on 11%.
Yep.
So lucky we had the income that we could back it up if we had some equity that we could draw on if we needed to.
Yep.
Purchasing a variety of properties, houses and units.
Okay.
In Melbourne, and just holding those for as long as we could, and also adding value. I think when the property market in Melbourne was seen to be flat and it can't possibly grow anymore. We know that it did, but back then we thought that it was going to cease for at least a few years.
Right.
Then I remember Bill Zeng from Investors Direct said, this is the production phase. This is where you buy a property and you get your hands and your feet dirty and you go in and you renovate it, because you're not going to get capital growth for the next few years. You're going to have to do the work yourself.
Yep.
And so we renovated majority of our properties. We were owner-builder. We did extensions. But when we purchased, we always purchased something we could add value to.
Excellent. Now, I just want to pick up on something that is a really important point for people to appreciate, and that is that you mentioned that you were able to and prepared to go down the non-conforming lending route, and yes, you're paying a premium for doing that. But what I'm hearing here is a recognition that it's more important to be able to secure the asset base so that you can then at least enjoy the ride as far as a capital growth, rather than stay out of the market altogether because of the potential cost of the finance. So can you just share a little bit more around that with us? Because there are a lot of people who just focus on the interest rate on loans, and that becomes in their head a reason not to do something, whereas both you and I know that time in the market has a massive impact on the end result. Can you sort of put a little bit more colour around that for us, Tracy?
Yeah, sure. You're right. It is about getting in the market because you can read all the books you like, but when you're actually doing it, it makes a lot more sense. So getting in the market, but also buying the right property as well. It's really, really important that you buy the right property.
Yep.
And you have the flexibility. So you might fix a portion of your loans, but then keep another portion variable.
Yep.
You buy something that you can add value to. So if you do want to buy again, or you do need to access that equity, you've got the ability to create that equity as well.
Yeah.
So I think that it's important to have your goals written down, and what we used to do is every year we used to write what we wanted to happen in that following year, and we've kept all of those, and we actually look back on them and we say, okay, we wanted 3 properties by a year and we wanted 4 properties by then, and we actually exceeded those goals.
Fantastic.
So we were always ahead of what it was that we wanted to do, and you've got to stick to those.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's awesome, and that again, good learnings, because if you're clear on what the end result is, then you've got more motivation to work towards it. So, no, awesome work there. Now, I guess in parallel with what you're saying there, Tracy, in terms of adding value and through renovation and whatnot, given the recent changes to the budget last year, where depreciation effectively has now been removed from the purchase of existing properties, then there's, in terms of that affordability piece, by using tax incentives through the depreciation, there's probably a stronger motivation now for either building new properties and or buying existing properties and then renovating them so that you can start the clock on depreciation and assist with keeping that ongoing holding cost down. Is that what you're finding in the market from your experience?
Yeah, look, I always tell people that don't look at the little things. I mean, okay, you can't fly interstate and look at your property anymore, but that's not why you're investing.
Yeah.
You're investing for the long term and the overall figures. So
yeah.
people who get mixed up or deterred from investing because of a few dollars, you're better off purchasing something that is going to grow. So if you've got your top 5 suburbs, then the best thing to do would be to get in, because 1% difference in one suburb can make $1 million difference in 10 or 20 years' time.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is so true. And that if most Australian property investors are focusing on growth, and that rate of growth over the long term can have a massive impact. So that's awesome advice. Now, you spent 8 years in property management. Talk to us about what happened then. What was the next change, why, and where did that lead to?
Sure, I went to become licensee at a real estate company in Melbourne who was helping secure properties for the Master Builders Association. So I got into development blocks, and then I learned a lot about that. And then I went back to property management, and I also did a 5-year stint at an investment company who were building properties in growth areas in South East Queensland, and that was my first taste of South East Queensland and learning about Queensland. And Peter Beattie was Premier at the time, and he was giving lots of incentives for companies to move their offices up in Brisbane.
Right.
So I took a real turn to learn about more of the statistics about an area, and learned about Brisbane and was helping investors build portfolios up here in South East Queensland.
Okay.
So I eventually was running both states, Melbourne and Brisbane.
Right. And then the transition then into the buyer's agent space. Tell us about how that came about and what your thinking and motivations were around that time, please.
Sure. Well, I had a son in 2012. I had a little boy in 2012, and we always said that we would follow the sunshine when we had kids.
Okay.
So we packed up when he was 6 weeks old, and we sold our property in Windsor, just off Chapel Street.
Yeah.
And we got on a plane and headed up north. So I spent probably the next year and a half looking after him and running my animal welfare not-for-profit organisation, and then decided, okay, time to get back into real estate. And my mum had always said to me, you need to be a buyer's agent. You're so good at helping people and you know a lot about property. So I thought, okay. I knew I'd been offered a couple of buyer's agent jobs in Victoria in my career, and I never did them because I was too busy doing other roles. But I got up here and I thought, now this sounds like, a niche that I could fall into, because I had the property management experience that I could advise people. I'd been on the sales side. I could source development blocks. I had a huge range, so it really was something that I enjoyed. I mean, I could advise people on finance and lending and negative gearing. So when you've got that whole gamut of information and expertise under your belt, I think you're in a good position that you can help people and answer any questions that they have with regards to potential investment.
Yeah, brilliant. So, because I'm a very strong supporter of the growth of buyers agents as a much-needed part of the overall team sport that makes up elite performance in property. And I guess interested in your thoughts because there's still it's probably very well accepted in Queensland, but it's still in very early days in South Australia. And there's sometimes a reticence around, well, why should I pay extra for a buyer's agent to try and find me a property? For those that might still have those feelings, can you shed some light on the benefits of using a buyer's agent for us, please, Tracy?
Sure. I think when people take the time to find out what it is that we actually do, I think they realise the value of it. Yeah. I have people who ring me who have had friends or family that have used a buyer's agent and say, you must use a buyer's agent. I mean, we can usually save you money. Yeah. And we're talking on the investment side now. We can usually negotiate really well. We can put conditions in the contract that a layperson wouldn't know existed. Yeah. We can interpret building and pest reports a lot better. Yeah. I can look at a property and anticipate any renovation potential or maintenance issues that might come up in the future. Yeah. Also negotiating building and pest, knowing what's a defect, what's a not, what we can claim, what we can't. Yeah. Also the relationship with agents, because I'm talking to agents all the time and you get to know them. So when I make a phone call to ask about a property, I get a completely different response to the general public and what they would be told when they speak to an agent. Yeah, of course. Of course. We know the agents that overquote. We know the agents that underquote. We've got the data. Yeah. So I can give a range as to what I think the property is worth. Also because I've seen in so many, hundreds and hundreds of properties, that I can very easily discern, even just looking on photos, aerial maps, Google Maps and data, whether or not it's worth making the next cut. I think that, I'll give you an example. Actually, I'm working with a client at the moment. He's looking for a unit for his son in the Gold Coast. Yeah. And he said to me, there's so many units on the Gold Coast. And I said, well, there's not many good ones. And he said, well, what do you mean? And so I showed him how to use RP data to sort newest to oldest, what to look for by the time you entered this in and entered that in. And then he realised, well, there's really not that much there, is there? And so out of about 300 units, I shortlisted 3.
There you go. Yeah, excellent. Absolutely right. And removing the emotion from the purchase, because property can, even when you're buying an investment property, people tend to get too much attached to the bricks and mortar and focus more on that than they do the numbers quite often.
Yes, and some people just can't make decisions. So they say, look, I need to do something. Can you kind of take the reins? They might be nervous about paying too much. They may not know how to negotiate. They may not know how to look for. I mean, people might buy a property for an investment and then realise that they can't get access for some reason, or they can't get in to get tenants, or there's something unforeseen that they didn't know about. I had a client that wanted a property for short-term lease, and went and bought a property and realised that it was in a low-density area, and you couldn't put it up for a short-term lease. So then he had to put a long-term tenant into that one, and then came to me and said, right, now can you find me something that I can actually get short-term rental on?
Yeah, exactly right. And I guess some people probably need to get a bit of a blood nose early on to recognise the benefits that you bring to the table, and that learning process by you guiding them in that regard and letting them come to that conclusion is an important part of that process. So, no, that's excellent, Tracy. Now, just as part of your day-to-day, because we assist a lot of investors, and we tend to avoid the auction process, again, because of the amount of emotion that comes into that. In your experience and with what you do, where does auctions fit into the purchase arrangements for potential buyers as you see it?
Sure. As long as the client has the appropriate finance in place and the bank or broker has given the okay that they can purchase a property under auction conditions. I love a good auction. I'm a Melbourne girl. That's what we used to do. We used to go out and go to auctions every weekend. And when I first moved to Brisbane, there was not an auction in sight.
Right.
So I do bid on behalf of clients at auction, and I love it. I'm the first one to start. Brisbane people are a little bit unsure, and I think if they don't bid, they're not going to get it. The idea is to bid so that you can get the property.
Yes.
And just to have a strategy that you're not paying much more than $1,000 over the last person.
Yes.
I mean, auctions are all about having a persona about you that you are not going to stop.
Yes, exactly right. There's quite a psychology around the whole auction process, isn't there? And
there is.
Yeah, and certainly having a good buyer's agent there acting on your behalf, that is still independent and objective in terms of that negotiation would be a real benefit. So, no, that's good. Now, I guess something I just would like to run past you, and let's take a local example if we can. A lot of our investors are long-term capital gain investors. They tend to be time-poor professionals who have an interest in property but just don't have the time or the expertise. They generally investing for a 15-year horizon at least, and they tend to fall in the bracket of, from an affordability perspective, given Adelaide incomes and equity levels, a focus on homes rather than units, and generally in the sort of 450 to 550 price bracket. If someone with that sort of a profile came along to you, and given there's quite a bit of an interest in and around South East Queensland, given the strong potential for growth over the long term, what would you be doing with them, and where would you be pointing them in the current marketplace?
Sure. Brisbane's very, very different to the Sydney and Melbourne property market. So if we're looking at Brisbane, you want to get as close to the CBD as possible.
Yeah.
25 k's out of Brisbane is completely different to 25 k's out of Melbourne or Melbourne or Sydney.
Yeah.
So getting a good quality property as close to the CBD as possible is the first criteria.
Yeah.
Second criteria is transport. The train lines are great up here. There is a large bus network.
Yeah.
So I always do try to follow the train lines as best as I can.
Yes.
I have a few criteria, like not unless it's requested of me by a client for a specific reason, I won't purchase on main roads. I won't purchase in new high-rise developments. I look for properties that have got a great aspect, that are rentable. If it's a unit, low body corporate fees.
Yeah.
That 450 to 550 house bracket, I want to try and get as much land as possible. So it's all about a balancing act as well.
Yeah.
You could be on a 450 metre block a bit closer in, or you could go to a 600 metre block, but we'd be looking another 2-3 k's out of Brisbane.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, no, that's awesome. No, that's a really good criteria that you apply to that process. Now, one of the exercises that I've sort of learned personally over our own investment journey is the importance of a team approach to our success, and involving a group of independent professionals in each and every aspect of the property delivery. How important is that sort of a team approach to your success, have you found?
Sorry, Bushy, I didn't hear that question.
Yeah, that's okay. So how important is a team approach to your both personal property success and your business success so far?
Oh, a team is everything. You really need to have good people that you're working with, a good conveyancer that keeps you in the loop,
yeah,
a great property manager who knows what your objectives are.
Yeah.
Definitely, it is a team approach for sure. A good broker, brokers are always better than going straight to the banks because you've got that flexibility of lenders.
Yes.
So the brokers are a key person in that team.
Yeah, fantastic. And on the personal front, Tracy, I guess what I've found in my own personal experience and talking to others, the most successful investors that I've come across are those where quite often one of the parties, either husband or wife, will be career-focused and generating the income, while the other partner tends to have more time to build the wealth that then will replace that income long-term. How does the support of your partner fit into your success journey so far?
Oh, look, I think it's important to be on the same page. I think you need to have common goals and you need to stick to them.
Yeah.
I think we've got very different strengths. My husband is a mechanical engineer and he's very finance focused.
Yep.
Whereas I'm more property focused with regards to the type of property, where it is, and all of those considerations. So definitely it's about building on those strengths.
Yeah.
And learning from one another and allocating tasks, if you like.
Yeah.
One does one while the other does another set of jobs, and so that you're complementing one another.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to my wife and I. Yeah, we're a bit of a yin and yang in that regard, and there's that you need the structure and the number crunching, which tends to be me, and then on the flip side of that, I guess I talk about I'm the head and she's the heart, and you put those two together
yeah.
and you've got a pretty good combination. It sounds very much like yourself and your husband are similar in that regard. So now I always like to explore that a little bit, because I've just found that success generally doesn't come down to one person. It comes down to a couple being on the same page and then collectively making that happen. So, no, that's good. Now, the other thing I just sort of wanted to get a feel from you was how important mentors are to you and your journey so far. Have you sought out mentors, or are there people that you seek advice from, and how beneficial has that been to your journey today, Tracy?
Oh, look, definitely. I mean, from when we started researching investment property and what it was all about, we went to all of the seminars, and I still receive newsletters from a lot of those companies to see what they're doing. And I mean, the landscape's definitely changed.
Yep.
And there's a lot of new experts coming on that bring really valuable information to the table. So I think that when you're investing so much money, you need to be spending time on it. You can't just buy an investment property and leave it sit there. If you really want to be taking care of your money and building a portfolio, or just even managing effectively the portfolio that you've got, you need to be researching all the time, just keeping up to date, and that might be subscribing to blogs or podcasts or getting newsletters, and just seeing what the latest is, and just keeping in the loop about everything.
Yeah, okay, awesome. All right, look, now I'm going to sort of pivot a little bit here and change direction a little bit in the context of talking to us about your passions outside of work, because again, from doing some reading, clearly you're a massive advocate in the animal welfare space and have been very instrumental in doing some fantastic things in that area through Oceans to Earth. So can you share with us that journey, why you got into it and where it's led you to, and what's happening in that regard for us, please?
Sure, I'd love to. I've always been an animal advocate and always had a dream to volunteer with elephants.
Excellent.
So in 2001, I went over to Thailand with my sister.
Yep.
And we went to an elephant rescue centre. And it was just a shock. It was just an eye-opener of animals that had been rescued from the logging industry, that were psychologically damaged, that were living at this rescue centre, and it was up to us to bathe them every day and provide enrichments and feed them bananas and mango balls.
Wow.
There was also 450 other animals there at the Wildlife Centre as well, who had all been rescued from either car hits, dog attacks, they'd been rescued from the illegal pet trade, or they'd been kept as pets. So when a bear gets too big, then they tend to want to say, okay, the bear's too big now, what are we going to do with it? And it would end up at this rescue centre. So on returning, my sister and I thought we need to do something about this. So what we did is, rather than travel the world volunteering, we set up a company to recruit volunteers, source volunteers for organisations such as the one in Thailand.
Okay.
So now we're in 7 countries and we have over 20 volunteering programs.
Yep.
And we've raised over $500,000 in volunteer fees and provided over 50,000 working hours where people, predominantly young people between 18 and 40, pay for the privilege of caring for rescued animals in rescue centres and wildlife shelters around the world. Fantastic.
It's just awesome work, because it's just, I guess the reason I'm keen to delve into this a little bit more is that my wife Sonia and I are big advocates of the voiceless and the innocent, and the abuse that gets dealt out to the animal kingdom is quite often just beyond belief.
Yes.
Can you share some of those really heart-rending personal stories that you've experienced on that journey, either with the elephants and the bears and the others, just so that people really get an understanding of the work that you're doing and the impact that's making?
Yeah, it's pretty heartbreaking. I mean, when we went over there, we thought that we'd just feed some animals and come home, but we were given a 3-hour tour of the centre, and we were given the stories of many, many of the animals that were there. The first one that comes to my mind was a tiger named Meow. Meow's become quite famous, actually, because he's been featured in so many documentaries and articles because of his situation. He was a tiger that was tied up at a service station in Thailand and fed lollies. So his brain didn't develop and he had neurological issues. So Edwin Week, who is the founder of WFFT, which is Wildlife Friends Foundation Thailand, he managed to gently talk the petrol station owner into giving Meow up. Yep. And Meow came to live at the centre, and he was there for about 11 years.
Wow.
And Edwin Week had every single vet, doctor, neuroscience expert, you name it. They all came to the centre to work with Meow to get him to be able to walk properly, and be able to eat properly. So when I saw Meow, it was for the first time. It was just devastating to see how human interaction had delivered this beautiful animal into the state that he was in. So, but that's just one story. There's thousands and thousands of stories of the animals that we've met over time since the birth of Oceans to Earth. And we work with Cairns Turtle Rehab Centre in Cairns, and they've got an intensive care unit where they bring in animals that have been had flippers taken off from propellers from boats. We all know the marine debris is a big issue. Yeah. And so turtles get caught in nets and have to have flippers amputated, and they swallow all kinds of ingest plastics. So we see a lot of turtles go through Cairns Turtle Rehab, and our volunteers get to feed them and care for them. Yeah. And when they're ready for release, if they can be released, then we put a tracker on them and a GoPro camera. Wow. And off they go, and when they get about 100 metres out to sea, we give the cord a tug and the GoPro comes off its back, and we get to see, going out to sea and what it did, and my sister tracks the movements of the turtle as well. Brilliant.
Awesome. Well, that's really meaningful work and making a big difference there. Is the work that you do through Oceans to Earth, then, if someone wanted to get involved, Tracy, it sounds very hands-on, so the people actually help out in these centres, and it's around the world, is it? So if I wanted to get involved, for example, where would you lead me? What would I be doing?
Sure. Well, in Victoria, we've got a shelter where you'd be bottle feeding baby wallabies and wombats every 4 hours. Awesome. So that's incredible. That's in the Stanley Forest. Yeah. We have a lot of international volunteers come out. We had a volunteer from New York come out last year, and she was just completely out of her comfort zone because of how dark it was. She was used to the lights of New York, and the forest was just so dark. But you can go and do shark research in South Africa. Wow. We've got turtle and wildlife programs in the Amazon, so you can look after the most incredible, unique animals in the Amazon. Wow. We've got our turtles, we've got our elephants, and we've got marine conservation programs as well. Okay. So we clean up beaches, and we do Eye on the Reef, which is with Grumpa, the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, to record data off the reef. Yeah. So there's lots of things you can do, whether just whatever takes your fancy, really, but you will work hard. Yeah. And you'll work long hours because the animals need feeding and caring for all the time. Yeah. But it's very rewarding.
Yeah, no better reward. We in a very small way, which doesn't even pales into insignificance compared to what you're doing, but we rescue dogs who are about to be put down, and when you... I'm not sure whether you've got dogs yourself, Tracy, but the unconditional love that you get from a dog is absolutely second to none. And the way they teach you to live in the moment rather than get worried about stuff that doesn't matter is very grounding at times. So, congratulations. You're doing some fantastic work there. And from what I can see, obviously that's been recognised, and you've earned a lot of public recognition and awards for all the work that you're doing in that regard. So massive effort. Now, I guess sort of bridging from there, because it's clear there's an obvious passion for the work that you're doing in that regard. And if we translate that into, you know, what would be your ideal lifestyle? What's your perfect day, week, month, year? And then compare that to where you are and what the gap is. Can you just describe to us what your perfect lifestyle would be for a minute, please, Tracy?
Oh, I'm living the perfect lifestyle, Bushy.
Love it. Good on you.
I've got... I just need more time. That's what I need to buy. That's the gap.
Yes.
I've got an amazing job and I work very closely with people. The relationships that I build with my clients over weeks and months are really special.
Yeah.
I had a 65-year-old client 2 weeks ago just put his hand on my arm and say, I could not have done this without you. This has been extremely stressful for me.
Brilliant. So
that's the kind of reward that I get from my job. So I absolutely love helping people. I work with Oceans to Earth. Again, just incredible to be able to be writing the checks to the wildlife shelters every week just to send them more and more money so that they can buy more medicines and look after more animals.
Brilliant.
I just wish I had more time. So that's the only thing that I would say. But I've got a beautiful family, a beautiful 5-year-old, a beautiful husband. We're building a house in Pullenvale at the moment.
Yeah.
So life doesn't get much better than this.
I love it. I love it. That's really great to talk to someone who's loving life. My wife and I are very similar. I do a Toyota jump every morning. Yeah. Tracy, with how good life is. But let's talk a little bit about that time issue, because it is something that everyone I talk to, I'm time poor, I don't have time, I'm too busy. I guess I've written and published a book earlier this year that sort of delved into this subject quite a bit. And I guess the take-home I had from that is that while a lot of Australians tend to focus on career and income, what I've noticed for those who actually do get their time back are those that are proactively investing in assets that ultimately can replace their income and then free up their time. You're obviously doing that in property and through your business vehicle. But can you talk to us a little bit about where that's heading and what else you might be investing in between now and the time when you can actually dedicate more of your available time to all of those pursuits, what you're investing in?
Sure. I think autonomous, the ability to be autonomous is really important. We need to systemize, we need to get processes in, and we need to use the resources that we have around the world now to make sure that our systems are there without us, I suppose. I mean, I'm very, very IT focused. Okay. So software, I've got a couple of VAs. So I've got some people in the Philippines and in India who do a lot of work, and it's fantastic to work with them and have the relationships with them so that you can teach them and have them run certain aspects of your company. Yeah. I think with me, why I want more time is because there's certain things that I do that I can't outsource. Yeah. So all of the information that I have, I have to use in order to get my clients into the right investment. Yeah. And it's very difficult to teach 20 years of what I know to somebody. And I know that some companies hire people to do this, and you might go to a buyer's agent and there might be somebody who's an employee there that's worked in property for a little while, and they just become an order taker. Yes. And somebody rings up and says, I've got $600,000, buy me a house in Brisbane, and within 1 week it's done. Wow. I think that the art is for me to talk to them about what their objectives are when they are looking at retirement or being self-sufficient. So are we going to look at a positive growth property? Are we going to look at a negative growth property and look at capital growth, focus on capital growth.
Yeah.
So all of that strategy comes from me.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very careful not to take on more than 2 to 3 clients at any one time.
Okay.
And they'll all be at different parts in the process as well.
Sure.
Because I want to be able to work to them to say, okay, well, I know you're thinking about buying this, but look, let's look at some other options, because I think that in order to achieve your goals, we need to have a look at this, and actually challenge them and say, look, I'm the expert. I'm going to help you get into a proper investment that might perhaps perform better. So I can't outsource that.
Yeah.
So as much as I'd like to get someone to be able to do that, there's only so many things that I can outsource.
Yeah.
But I love those relationships, and that's what I love about this job. But eventually what I'll do is, I think I'll teach my son. Because I'll do what my mum did to me, and he'll grow up in the family business, and then I'll be confident enough to give it over to him.
Keep it in the family. Love it.
Exactly. Well, you don't like to, this is important. This is really, really important. It's about getting the best possible property that you can get, even if it means turning down great properties that are a little bit overpriced, to just wait until the right one comes along, or get on the phone and ring those agents and find all those off-market opportunities.
Yes.
Because as we spoke about before, 1% can make all the difference. 0.5% can make all the difference if you're focusing on a capital growth strategy.
Yes.
If you're looking at positive growth strategy, it all depends, again, on those objectives. But, I've sourced short-term accommodation properties for people that are rented out through Airbnb and short-term rentals.
Yep.
And they're a great option for people nowadays. So I love doing what I'm doing. I love being busy. It's great that you can watch TV and be on your smartphone at the same time.
Yeah, technology is a great enabler. You can pretty much work from anywhere now, which is exciting, really. Yeah. So, no, I love that, Tracy. Now, I guess just talking about that, because you've been in the industry a long time, and there are some winds of change that are coming through. We're seeing the APRA come Productivity Commission, and now the Royal Commission on Banking, that's really sort of tightening up the access to finance. There's been a lot of talk around the so-called housing affordability issue, and the Labor government at the federal level talking about tinkering with negative gearing and capital gains tax and a number of other things. What's your view on the short to medium term future with all of these potential change drivers, and what impact do you think it's going to have on property? And as importantly, what sort of an approach do you think particularly long-term capital gain investors should be taking in the context of all of that?
Sure, I think now is the best time to do it. If we're looking at investing in South East Queensland, it's just such a great time to invest. The figures that come out of the media are general figures over the whole of South East Queensland, or the whole of Queensland.
Yeah.
Blue chip suburbs in Queensland have been performing incredibly well over the last few years, so I would just be urging people to get in as soon as they could.
Yeah.
Look, we don't invest for capital for negative gearing.
No.
That's not why we invest, even though it's great to get a little bit of tax back. That's not the end game, really.
Yeah.
The end game is to build a good quality property portfolio in a good location, near transport, near infrastructure, near cafes, shopping centres, restaurants. Good quality property will also get you good quality tenants as well.
Yes.
So, yes, look, I think it's great that lending has tightened. Too many people were getting into loans when they shouldn't have been and getting caught out. So I think that it's great that the government's holding banks accountable, and only people who can afford to invest are investing. Yeah. But again, it's a matter of writing those goals, finding out where you want to be and how you're going to get there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. That's awesome advice. Okay, well, sort of bringing that to sort of a summary position, a couple of key questions. If we look back on your journey so far, what have been your best or most most worthwhile investments to date, Tracy, and why? And I'm not just talking about property. I'm talking about your learning, your skills, your resources, property, and other things.
Yeah, sure. Look, I would say my first property, that first house that I bought in Surrey Hills. It's that time in the market. It's just getting something.
Yeah.
Because that's always going to be your best property. If you're meeting certain criteria of what a good investment is,
yeah, and
you're buying that property, then that's the one that's going to improve in value. Yeah. I mean, in Brisbane, I was buying townhouses in Yeronga for $415,000 2 years ago. Yeah. You will not get anything under $475 now.
Yeah, there you go.
Of similar property.
Yeah.
So that's a huge growth return on property. So yeah. I would just say get in as soon as you can.
Yeah.
And just make sure that you have the safeguards that you have a mentor
yeah.
that is independent.
Yes.
That is working for you.
Yeah.
That does not get any commissions or kickbacks or anything from anything that they would be putting investors into.
Yes.
There's a lot of marketers and building companies spruiking their own stock and preying on investors and manipulating figures and coming up with these ideal scenarios of what people should be doing.
Yeah.
So I would be very careful who your mentors were, and I would do enough research so that you align yourself with people who are wanting to help you and working in your interest.
Yeah, you make a very good point, and it's I guess in alignment there. We talk about the need to have people that are working on your side of the fence if you're a property purchaser, and that can be an independent property strategist as long as they're part of the PIPA professional property investment professionals of Australia, a good buyer's agent who's engaged and paid by you to find the property, and if you're building, then an independent project manager who's keeping the builder and everyone else honest on that journey. They're pretty cool, pretty key to all of that.
Correct.
So yeah, no, that's very good advice. Now, if you spoke to a school leaver, what would you advise them to invest their time, money, and skills in to create freedom and get their time back?
A school leaver? Did you say Bushy?
Yeah.
Someone straight out of school?
Yes.
I would say a one-bedroom unit or a two-bedroom unit in the bluest chip suburb you could possibly get into.
Yeah, exactly right. I'm not sure about yourself, but in line with what you were saying before, when people ask us when's the best time to buy, I say to them every time you can, but just make sure that you're careful about where you do that. So
yes.
No, that's...
and get a hard-working broker onto it. As long as you're you've got the affordability and you've got the safeguards in place, then as soon as possible.
Yeah, no, brilliant advice. Now, I'm going to switch it up a little bit to what I call the ambush. I'm feeding off my nickname now, but the ambush bushfire round, where I ask a couple of quick questions here, Tracy. So,
sure.
Just to kick into that, what's your favourite quote and why?
What's my favourite quote?
And it can be one of your own. It doesn't have to be anyone else's. But
yes, I do have a favourite quote.
Yeah.
I use it with my 5-year-old son all the time.
This will be good. I'm looking forward to this one. What is it?
It's oh, now I've forgotten what it is, Bushy.
That's all right.
Sorry, you might have to outtake this one a little bit.
No, that's all right. Why don't we let's let that click over in your brain, and I'll ask another question, and we'll jump back to it if you think of it.
It's only four words that I've just gone blank.
Yeah, I know the feeling. It happens to me all the time. What about the top book that you would recommend people read and why? Any
Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah, it is a cracker, isn't it? Napoleon Hill. It's an all-time
classic. You can't invest without without reading that. That's the 101.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
anything Robert Kiyosaki's written is fantastic.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah. Well, do you listen to podcasts at all, or any podcasts that you suggest people have a listen to?
Look, I do. I listen to a variety of podcasts. Yours, of course, Bushy.
I'll pay you later for that one, Tracy.
Yeah. I've listened to a little bit of the Property Couch.
Yep.
Which I don't mind.
Yep.
But mainly I'm a bit of a blog reader. I love getting in there and reading articles.
Okay.
And getting stuck into statistics and growth and the economy and what's happening in South East Queensland, job highs being 10-year record high into 2017 in the amount of immigration that's coming up here.
Yes.
And a bit more government spending as well.
Yeah.
Which all helps.
Absolutely. Okay, and a little bit of a change of tack here. It's a bit of a hobby horse of mine, Tracy, so bear with me on this one, but I guess I've had a feeling for a long time, and I get this comment from a lot of others that Australians pay a lot of tax. So what's the top thing that you've done to pay less tax?
Sorry, Bushy?
Yeah, what's the top thing that you've done to pay less tax?
To pay less tax?
Yeah.
Is property invest, most definitely.
Yeah, yes.
Yes, and also to investigate different structures, different holding entities as well.
Yeah.
I think that it's important that part of the process when you're investing in property is to go to a specialised accountant who knows about property investing.
Yeah.
Now, the first 1, 2 or 3 might be in your personal name, but the ones after that you might decide to put into a trust.
Yes.
When kids come along, that changes the situation again.
Yeah.
So I think definitely to minimise tax and to maximise your strategy, you need to learn all about how you can utilise, if you've got a company, how you can utilise your company, how you can utilise your trust, making sure it's the right trust.
Yes.
That's favourable to property investing.
Yeah.
And just having a really proactive accountant who's an accountant who also focuses on strategy, not just doing a tax return.
Yes, that's a great piece of advice because they are pretty few and far between. There's a lot of tax accountants out there, but not many that actually look proactively and strategically at what you need to be doing to achieve your end goals. That's brilliant advice, Tracy. Okay, another quick one. What's both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received?
The worst piece of investment advice would be when you go on holidays and you agree to sit for an hour and a half and listen to a seminar about the holiday pool.
This sounds like a... I've been there and I hated every minute. I walked out with a T-shirt after 2.5 hours and thought, what did I just waste my life doing that for?
Look, the thing is that and this is where people can get emotionally carried away as opposed to having mentors that keep them on track.
Yes.
But it's very compelling, and I can see why people would sign up and pay $16,000 thinking that they can have a holiday around the world every year, staying at a fantastic resort. But when you actually do the numbers on it, it doesn't make any sense. No. It really doesn't make any sense.
No.
So that's definitely the worst piece of advice. And maybe that's not per se a property investment, but it's certainly an investment.
Yeah, it is.
Where somebody's asking you to put a lot of money into a scheme that's designed to get you emotionally involved. Yes. When you actually go to book any of these properties, it just doesn't add up.
No, that's a very good one actually, and they do prey on people on holidays who are relaxed and therefore can be put under pressure in that regard. That's
Exactly.
that's a very good example. What about the best piece of investment
The
advice you've received?
Sure, the best piece of learning, I suppose, that I ever received was once when I was doing a seminar 15 odd years ago, and the presenter was talking about how most people have, if you like, what he called a cup. And once your cup is full, then most people don't go and overflow the cup. The idea is that the cup is money, or your goals, or your vision. And once you hit the top of the cup, that's it. That's your lot in life. That you'll only ever be at that point. And yet what he spoke about was about making that cup bigger all the time, looking at implementing strategies that you can actually swap that small cup for a medium cup and swap that medium cup for a large cup, and always looking at what you can do to inch yourself further to increasing that cup, and that cup being your wealth. So then when you're actually wanting to semi-retire or retire, you've got enough in that cup that you can do so.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. That's a really easy one to remember from a visual perspective. No, that's awesome. Okay, then in coming back to you personally then, Tracy, what's a personal habit that you believe contributes to your own investment success?
Just always learning and always striving. I've been called a professional university student on many occasions because I just love learning, and I've gone and got a degree plus 3 postgraduates if the first degree wasn't enough. As part of my Oceans to Earth experience, I spent a month in Kenya with a community there that was experiencing human-elephant conflict.
Wow.
And I worked with the community to find out what the social impacts of that was. And so I think that you can always broaden your mind with regards to investment, but you need to also have balance. And my animal welfare business really keeps me grounded on what's important and what drives my property business, or me to do well in my property business, is that then all of those efforts go back into what's important to me, and that's my family, time with my family, my animal welfare business, and trying to take as many people as I can and changing the way that they look at things. So I always hope that the volunteers that come to the organisation to volunteer take with them something, even if it's something small like throwing your plastic bottles in the recycling bin, or just anything to learn about global responsibility and creating a sustainable lifestyle so that we can start putting back into a world that we've taken so much out of.
Yeah, it's brilliant thoughts, Tracy. Okay, well, sort of coming to a close then, what's next new and exciting for you and Cherish Property?
Oh, just looking forward to meeting new people in this year and next year. There's many homeowners that need help with purchasing property as well. So I'll get to work with many homeowners in Brisbane. Also, I offer a vendor advocacy service. So
talk to us a little bit about that, Tracy, because a lot of people, and I'm talking here locally within the South Australian confines, wouldn't really know what vendor advocacy is. Can you just sort of put some shape around that?
Most people don't. Vendor advocacy is basically being a support person if you're selling your home. So if someone decides to sell their home, the first thing that they do is go and get an agent to come to their home and talk to them. But that agent has a vested interest. There's a lot of older people who are selling their homes and they're left in vulnerable positions with agents. So a vendor advocate is there to help the vendors choose an agent.
Yep.
To make sure that they're not pressured into a sale
Yep.
because it may not be the right price, conditions, or time.
Okay.
And basically be the intermediary person but in the sales process.
Yes.
A lot of people sell their homes and think it was the worst experience of their life, and they were always talking about agents and their negative experiences with agents.
Yeah.
So I just offer a service, which is a free service.
Really?
Yes, to help people find an agent. And if you don't want to deal with the agent, you don't have to. I'll deal with the agent.
Wow, that's an awesome service.
But make sure they're getting the best possible outcome when they sell their property.
Yes, well, with an ageing population, and you're right, sort of people physically and emotionally and mentally maybe not in as strong a position could be very easily taken advantage of by a pushy real estate agent and pressured into doing something.
And the agent's the expert, and I mean the agent can come over and say, I think your property is worth this, and they can print out the comparable sales, but what the vendor doesn't know is that you can delete from that list.
Yes.
And the agent can manipulate what that anticipated value looks like.
Yes.
So I can offer an independent report on that.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot of, like you said, older generation are selling their homes and they're not telling their kids.
Yes.
Because they think that their kids might interfere, or there's 3 kids and they don't want 3 opinions. And,
of course.
And so they're going and it's just them and the agent, and they're just, they put themselves in an incredibly vulnerable situation. I mean, the kids are well-meaning.
Sure.
In most situations, but so I'm there to go in to bat for those people.
Yeah, there's a real and growing need in that area actually. So that's something that I'll start talking to more people about actually, Tracy, because I think that can add a lot of value to people at a pretty critical time of their life, in actual fact. So, no, that's awesome. Okay, well, look, really appreciated the discussion we've had. I feel like we've only just started, really, Tracy. And you've shared with us some awesome insights around the whole property journey, and love talking to you about Oceans to Earth. I think the work you're doing there is sensational, and I hope that for those that are listening that have a similar interest, that they reach out to you to join the volunteer brigade in that regard.
Thank you.
If there are those that want to get in touch with you for either the animal welfare work or for Cherish Property, what's the best way to do that, Tracy?
Sure, they can email me at tracy@cherishproperty.com, which is TRACY@cherishproperty.com, or they can give me a call on my mobile.
Fantastic.
If you want.
Look, really appreciate your time. I'm sort of, with the Get Invested podcast, I'm sort of building up a network of people where on a periodic basis we'll touch base to talk about where the industry's at, where the various markets statewide are heading, and what are the factors that investors and property purchasers need to be thinking about. Would love to be part of that fraternity, Tracy, so that we can be just...
I'd love to. That would be great.
Terrific. So I'll certainly make sure that you're part of that. And thanks again, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks, Bushy. Thanks for the chat.
Thanks, Tracy.
Well, freedom fighters, how good was that? To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's hello@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/getinvested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you live forever and live as if you'll die